It's the third of the three-part series, isn't it, of Jonah? Is yours the last one? Oh, third or fourth. Okay. Third or fourth. Try and say that again. Third or fourth. So it's a great delight to introduce Pete, and excited to hear what you have to say.
Thanks. Nice to be with you. So there's a number of folks heading off to David's tent later part of this week to serve down there, which includes actually our worship team, Claire and these guys. They'll be helping to lead that worship event next Sunday, and so we're excited by that. But then there's Ren heading off down there to lead a sort of worship ministry team. Steph leading the children's work down there, so we're going to give an opportunity to pray for those folks at the end if you want to bless them, lay hands on them, because that's an important part of what we do. So, that was cool. Well, God's been speaking to me, so my notes are sort of now in chaos. But that's nothing new if you know me. So, some people actually ask me if they can have my notes for my sermons. I said, you can, but they won't look anything like my sermon, so so we're in a series on Jonah, and this is the third of four. Mark Henley started us off, giving us a great background overview, and then Donna followed up last week. My turn today, and then Joe Carter will finish us off, I'm sure, in spectacular style next Sunday. But I've read through this book a number of times. Now, it doesn't take long to read it. Hopefully you've had a chance to read it within the last few weeks. It doesn't take long, does it? As I look at it, there's obviously lots of detail in there, but there's a couple of things that are sort of glaring out at me personally of what this book is all about. And first thing that comes to me is God really does love the world. No, that didn't excite you, so he really does love the world. And that should excite you. He cares about the world. And then the second thing that comes out to me is that he is aware of world circumstances and more than capable of intervening. Okay, so if you imagine yourself living in that part of the world at that time, the Assyrians were not a good bunch of people. They were horrific in one sense. You think, whoa, what can we do about this? And you say, well, we can pray. Yes, we can. Does God care? Well, the answer is yes, he does. And how many people did he need to turn that around? Just think about it. How many people did he need to turn that situation around? The answer is one. Is that not amazing? Because sometimes we could be searching for solutions to the world's problems and think, well, how's this going to happen? And if you're not careful, we can get ourselves sort of almost worried about it. Now, there is masses going on in the world at the moment. There is. And it's going on in your world. There's not one of us who's not affected by what is happening on the world's sort of scale at the moment. Every one of us is juggling things, all sorts of things. Electricity prices, those sorts of stuff, food shortages, strikes. There's masses going on. It's like we're in a turmoil, isn't it? We come out of COVID and we've hit a turmoil. And, God did say, the troubles will be there every day. But and sometimes you think, well, how do we deal with this? Well, number one thing is we need to listen to God. What's God saying? And secondly, we need to be confident in God. And then I believe we need to make sure we're loving the world well. So I want to talk about that a bit. So it's been titled this Walking with God. And we'll look at that. But I want you to imagine, if you just to start off on that, walking with Jesus. How many of you would have liked to live in the time of Jesus? Yeah. That's one of those crazy. Yeah, not quite so sure, really. Those Romans weren't such nice dudes either, were they? The Romans were the sort of the Assyrians of their day. Would I have wanted to live there? Not quite so sure. Would I have liked to be with Jesus? Yes. Would you have liked to be with Jesus? That's an easier question to answer. Do you think you would have enjoyed every day with Jesus? Because I don't know if it's still going on, but when I was early Christian, there was these sort of Bible notes you could get every day with Jesus. Yeah. Anybody read those? Every day with Jesus, every day, that sort of nice thing. But I'm not sure they dealt with the full truth of every day with Jesus. Every day with Jesus was a bit of a shock and a surprise. Some days were calm, and probably Jesus appeals to me in a certain way. He doesn't need a lot of detail. Jesus got all the details, but he doesn't give a lot of detail, does he? Do you understand what I'm saying? So, hey, guys, let's go. Where are we going? I'll tell you later what we're going to do. Don't worry about it. You'll find out as we go on. And he leads them in a way that is radical, to say the least. Absolutely radical. And so I want to take us, there's a one man who has done something quite extraordinary to change our world. And his name is Jesus. And we can find the answers in him. No, that's a simple thing to say. And walking with Jesus is a daily delight. It's the greatest privilege you can have on planet Earth, but it is also probably the greatest challenge you'll ever face in life. Because what Jesus says to you is he wants you to lay down your life and follow him. So I've got all sorts of questions I want to ask you. Do you think your religious thinking, your spiritual thinking, which you had prior to Jesus coming, would have been challenged by the way Jesus lived? Yeah, the disciples were all over the place with that. And so if you think of something like James and John, they're going along, they're getting the idea, Jesus is powerful, and yeah, this dude's got some power. Hey, Jesus, we've got an idea. Those guys over there, should we fire from heaven? Just blitz them out? Shall we do that? No. Now, I love that story in all sorts of ways, because Jesus didn't tell them, don't be so stupid, you don't have that much power. He didn't say you can't do that. He said, you're of the wrong spirit. They had to learn how to use the power and the privilege that they had. And I want to suggest to you that's the story of Jonah. Here's a guy who knew God. And it's quite clear from the book that he knew God. And he knew in advance God's intention towards these Assyrians when he was taken to Nineveh. So I'm going to read out. So we're going to go in chapter 3 and we'll wander into chapter 4. Okay? You ready at the back, Patrick? It will appear. I'll start reading anyway. So Jonah chapter 3 said, the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. That's encouraging, isn't it? That God doesn't just stop first time. Do you always listen here first time? Well, you might hear, but do you do? How many times? Here's another one. How many times did it take Peter to be persuaded that he could eat Gentile food? 3 times. Yeah, I would like to think that if I had such an encounter with God as that, I'd get it first time round. But often we don't. And God is more than gracious enough to keep talking to us. So the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you. Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and went to Nineveh, second time round. Now Nineveh was a very large city. It took 3 days to go through it. It's a big city. Jonah began by going a day's journey into the city, proclaiming 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. The Ninevites believed God. I would like a bit more detail in there, wouldn't you? That's not a much of a sermon, but obviously it worked. This is and again, the Bible doesn't always give you the detail, but what I want to know is actually God had prepared the ground before he went. This is really important to understand. God prepares the ground usually before you go. The Ninevites believed God. A fast was proclaimed, and all of them, from the greatest to the least, put on sackcloth. When Jonah's warning reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, took off his royal robes, and covered himself with sackcloth and sat down in the dust. This is the proclamation he issued in Nineveh. By the decree of the king and his nobles, do not let people or animals, herds or flocks taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink. But let people and animals be covered with sackcloth. It'd be good to be in the sackcloth industry at that moment, wouldn't it be? Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish. I'm just going to comment on that. When I was getting ready for this, I just felt God really impress upon me that it's a phrase that I use quite commonly, have done for many years, but the phrase is this, is compassion without compromise. Okay, and I just want to land us on that. Does God love the world? Yes. Does he compromise who he is? Never. So that is possible, to love the world and not compromise. Now that's I think a Christian principle that we need to get hold of, because I think sometimes people think they're so compassionate that they compromise who they are, what they believe, in order to try and be loving. Well, the other side is that we need to change the way so we're uncompromising in our beliefs, and yet there's no love. Yeah, those are two parts of the spectrum. I believe God is loving and uncompromising. Jesus was absolutely clear who he was. I am this. Boom. And we need to be uncompromising in who we are, and yet loving the world as it is. Does that make sense? We're not meant to be trying to love the world in a way we hope it's going to become, but we have to love the world as it is right now, confident in who we are right now, and in the power and love of God working through us. So, when God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and did not bring upon them the destruction he had threatened. That's one man reluctantly preaching. And God says, boom. Why did God respond like that to the Syrians, the Ninevites? Their hearts changed, but what was he? What was he demonstrating? His love. He loves the world. He really does love the world. There isn't one human being on planet Earth that God doesn't love. You say, well, I think there should be. He hasn't met my next door neighbour. What about that chap, that Putin dude, Could God love Vladimir Putin? Not could he, can he not, is the answer. See, God can't deny who he is. He is love. So, let me ask you the question of yourself. Why does God love you? I don't know if you've ever asked that question to yourself. Why does God love me? Why does God love me? And people come up with all sorts of answers to that. The answer is it's got nothing to do with you. He loves you. In one sense, it's got to do with you. It's because he made you. He created you. But it's got nothing to do with your performance. He loves you because he loves you. Because he is love. He is love. And I remember, fortunately, God showed me this many, many years ago, not long after I was born again, that he did not love me because I performed well. He didn't love me because I was nice. He loved me before I was nice. He can't help but love the world. And then he chooses to demonstrate his love to the world. His love is not passive. So what's the best known verse in the Bible? Everybody knows it, all the world knows it. God so loved the world that. See, if you so love something, somebody, It's not a passive reality. It's a compelling reality to do something about that. God so loved the world that he sent his son. God so loved Nineveh that he sent a man. Fortunately, Jesus wasn't as reluctant. But he was reluctant in one sense, Jesus. Can you think of a time when Jesus was reluctant? Yeah, Gethsemane. He said, I don't fancy this. Is there another way? Can we renegotiate on this? And you can see the humanity of Jesus in that, because he and the Father had planned that before the foundation of the world. It wasn't a new idea. He knew what was happening. He knew what he was coming for. But did he fancy it? No. What did he choose? He chose to go through with it. Why? For the joy that was set before him. For the joy that was set before him. So let's see how Jonah reacts for the joy set before him. So they relented. God's taken away. But to Jonah, this seemed very wrong. I do love getting in the sort of the humour of the Bible. You're thinking, what's Jonah just doing here? Where's he placing himself in the hierarchy with God? Yeah, he's just judging God's actions and motive here. I knew you were going to get it wrong. That's why I didn't want to go. That's what he said. To Jonah, this seemed very wrong. He became angry. He prayed to the Lord. He's not praying to the Lord. He's telling the Lord, isn't this what I said, Lord, when I was still at home? That is what I tried to forestall by fleeing to Tarshish. He's blatant, this guy. I know what you were going to do, and I wasn't playing up. And you shouldn't have done it in the first place. I knew that you're a gracious and compassionate God. I knew you were going to do this. Now, what is Jonah forgetting here? That he needed God's grace and compassion, you see. He has put him, he's doing, this is the danger, okay? So he is comparing himself to those nasty Assyrians. And he comes out really well in his own mind. He's not putting himself in a place where he is grateful for the compassion and grace of God that has been exhibited to him personally on planet Earth. He wants justice. How many of you like justice? Dislike injustice? How many of you would like God to deal with you justly? Seriously, you say, do you like justice? Do you dislike injustice? Okay. How would you like to suffer for somebody else's wrongs? No? Fancy that? How would you like to be crucified for somebody else's wrongs? See, so many of us want what's fair, and fairness isn't grace. There's a lovely verse in the Bible, in Romans, and just stay with this one because I'll quote it, Patrick. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So how many of us have sinned? Have you sinned? Yes. Have you fallen short of the glory of God? Now, that's really interesting because sin, the result of sin is actually you fall short of your glorious destiny that God has given for you. The outcome of sin is not that you are a sinner, but it's not that the focus is not that you're a dirty, rotten sinner. Look at you, terrible person. It says, look at what you've fallen short of. God has this most amazing plan and destiny for your life, and sin will keep you from it. All have sinned. So every one of us have sinned. Now, when I was growing up, I was a good boy. Relatively speaking. By comparison. It was a shock when I realised I was a sinner. It was, I tell you, I thought, honestly, it was a massive shock to me when God convicted me of my sin. And I realized I needed to be forgiven. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. The wages of sin is death. Okay? How many of you like getting your pay packet at the end of the month? Seriously, how many of you would be upset if you didn't get your wages at the end of the month? Yeah, I think most of us say, hey, hold on a minute. I deserve my wages. I deserve my wages. I've done the stuff to deserve my wages. And God says, okay, you really want your wages? Do you really want your wages? No. The wages of sin is death. Where am I? Where is every one of us without Jesus? Dead in sin. But what is interesting, and I'll bring this up to date, as Christians, how often we think we're now the nice ones. And there's a great danger of comparison of ourselves to the world outside. And you see, this is so rife, I believe, in Christianity. How, broadly speaking, the church, okay, so I'm talking about a universal church here, not things anyone. I would say the atrocities of the church through judgment of the world over the course of centuries. Even recently, there's been a case in the news recently, which was just revisiting the enforced adoption of babies of unmarried mothers in our nation. Going back not that long ago. The enforced taking of babies from their birth mothers because these people weren't married. This was done by the social services, it was done by government. It's within the last, 30, 40 years? It was still going on. Kim's read some books about this with actually other nations. But it was... Now, which name gets mentioned alongside the government services in that? The church. Okay. The church is viewed as a judge, a harsh judge by the world. And it's not our job to judge the world. Okay? So we'll go back to this. Jonah says, I knew that you're a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding love, a God who relents from sending calamity. And his response is, now, Lord, take away my life. For it is better for me to die than to live. This is extreme. This is, what? He says, I prefer not to be alive than see you gracious. And I want to let you know that grace is offensive. It is continually offensive. It's been offensive for not just the New Testament era, it's been offensive in the Old Testament era, because God has always been gracious and compassionate. But when you get into read the New Testament, then it's basically religion and legalism chases grace wherever it goes to try pull it back into slavery. It's why in Galatians 5 verse 1, Jesus says, it was for freedom I set you free. Don't allow yourself to be slaves again. There's religion that's going to try and enslave you, and it'll enslave you with all sorts of attitudes. Okay, so you're familiar with John 3:16? Can we bring John 3:16 up? We're going to start at verse, probably go at 16. God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Not up yet? Okay, I'll keep going. God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world. Well, he should have done. Because there's some bad dudes out there. God did not send, this is really important, God did not send Jesus to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned. Isn't that beautiful? Now, But whoever does not believe stands condemned already. Because now, you see, people's condemnation is where they stand already. It's not what God has to, it's not the message of God towards. The message of God, the message of the gospel is I can take you out of that. Because they already stand condemned because actually they're dead in their sin. They don't have to do anything to do that. But it's the refusal to believe in Jesus and accept his forgiveness that people continue to live in condemnation. It says, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already because they have not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. Our job is to help people encounter Jesus. We have the greatest privilege on planet Earth, I believe, as Christians, is to represent Jesus on earth. Is that not a great job? I believe it's a great job. I'm excited about it. I believe as a church we need to be excited about it. But actually you can say, well, that sounds really good. It's going to be challenging. Why? The biggest opposition that Jesus got was from religious people. He did. Jesus talked about such folks. Where was it? He said, I'll just find it at the end of the notes. He talked about the Pharisees who stood at the door, not willing to enter into the kingdom, and not allowing anybody else to go in either. So Jesus, was Jesus kind towards the Pharisees? Yeah, no, not really. No. He resisted them. Jesus resisted them because they were standing in the way of the grace of God being expressed on planet Earth. They were insistent on judgment and condemnation. Now, the story of the lady caught in adultery is a classic one. What would have happened to her without Jesus? She'd have died. She'd have been stoned right there and then. How brave was Jesus to stand up for her? Seriously, no, that was a moment. Was he complicit with her sin? Did he compromise at all? No, he didn't. He heard from God, gave him wisdom in that situation, and he loved that lady without compromise, because at the end he said to her something quite interesting. He said, go, now you're free, go and sin no more. He says, I'll just set you free from your judgment, condemnation. You have an option now what you do with your life. As we demonstrate the love of God to people, and the powerful, it gives them an option of what they do with their life. The grace of Jesus was simply extraordinary. I'm convinced. I'm convinced if I'd been hanging on a cross, my first thought would not have been forgiving people around me. No, that would not be going through my mind. Forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. I think they know what they're doing, they just put me up here. So. They just nailed me to this thing. No. Who led Jesus to the cross? Was it the Romans? Yes, you could say it was. Was it the Pharisees? Yes. No. The Father led Jesus to the cross. Father led Jesus to the cross because he so loves me, you. And you need forgiveness, or needed forgiveness, just as much as the Assyrians, Ninevites, Vladimir Putin, Adolf Hitler, Saddam Hussein. This is offensive to people. What? You comparing me to those people? I'm just saying we were all dead in sin. That's really offensive what you just told me. You put me in comparison. I'm just saying all of humanity is in the same boat. Some express their lives in very, very wicked ways, okay? I'm not saying anything different to that. Some people live very kind lives, but still without Jesus, they're not born again. And we think, well, they should be, because they're nice and kind. Don't understand. Now, we could easily slip into that. Well, God would obviously want to save them because they're nice. So surely they'll make it into heaven. Then what if we just made entry into heaven on the basis of human performance rather than the grace of God? It's subtle, isn't it? But it's very easy to do, and Christians then become the nice ones who pass judgment upon other people. Here's one, I love this. Okay, Matthew chapter 5, verse 43. Sorry about this, Patrick, I'm going all over the place, I know. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbour and hate your enemy. That's in the Old Testament, okay? So he said, this is what it used to say. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Now, do you think that's a challenge? Love your enemies. Most of us get a chance to do that every day. Not so much enemies, but it's quite interesting. Kim and I live in sort of village a bit away from here, and we drive the country lanes. Now, that is a really interesting experience every day of how people want to give way or don't want to give way. And the worst thing you can do to somebody is not say thank you. You become an enemy instantly. It's really. So Kim and I were driving along the other day, we waited way back up the road from be very kind, let this person pass. And then they got, and we were just sort of trying to inch past, looking at the car, looking at this, because it was pretty tight. And this guy gave us a mouthful, didn't he? He was absolutely, I thought, hold on a minute, I just waited. So my response was, excuse me. If you don't mind, I was the one being kind to you. See how easy it is to take offence? A lot of opportunities to be offended in this world at the moment. Very easy to be offended by the medical world at the moment. Struggling, it really is. When you're at the forefront of that, it's tough. Okay. I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Then this says this, which I hadn't noticed before this week, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. Wow. That's John 3:16, sorry. This is Matthew 5. Loving your enemies and praying for those who persecute you is a characteristic of the children of God. So when we are not doing that, we're not acting as representatives of our Father. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. Isn't that great? I think we talk a lot about, and one of the things I've been convinced about for a few years now is that the understanding of God as Father, so I'm his son, I'm his daughter, it's easy for that just to be hijacked into me and God, me and personal, I'm with my Father, oh, it's lovely. And we're just going deeper together. Deeper. Well, how far are you going down there before you actually go out there? I don't think God called us to keep going deeper without going further. I don't mind you going deeper with God, but if there's no going out into the world, he called us to go out. And I'm getting a bit fed up with people who just want to go deeper without any desire to go out and love the world. It's becoming, I'm going to say this straight, I think it's becoming self-indulgent Christianity without a care for the world. And if we really love the world, we're going to go out there. And when it's inconvenient, when I don't want to do it, when it's uncomfortable, because I have a responsibility to love this world, not just love my Father in heaven. If I love my Father in heaven this much, it will explode out there. And there's lots of stuff attacking Christianity, which is just about me and God, really. It's individualistic, it's self-indulgent, and we are not going to be that as a church. Okay? we're going to love this world around us. We have masses of opportunity to love the world around us, not stand in judgment upon it. And that means loving people we don't necessarily like. But you know what happens when you do that? They can experience the Father's love. Because ultimately that's what they need. So one of the big issues, ethical issues that has been very relevant to me in my life as a work as a doctor was the issue of abortion. And and I had to work out really very in great detail what I thought about that issue as I was going through medical school, because I knew it was going to be confront me. It's a part of the medical world. You have to deal with it, particularly as a GP. People come to you. So I was quite straightforward. And if you want a little tip on this, I lecture, I do a lot of teaching on ethics, and I love to open the day up for people who want to explore that a bit deeper sometime. But basically, I believe the fundamental question you have to answer in this area is, when do you believe life begins? Once you believe life has begun, you have a responsibility towards safeguarding that life. Okay? Having worked that out, I thought, right, okay, well, then that's my response. I have to work that out in medical practice. Now, that hasn't been easy. It's cost me in some ways, but I've always been absolutely straightforward about it. I was straightforward about it once at a job interview. It cost me the job. And it was a good job. And suddenly our life was thrown into turmoil for a good number of months while I was unemployed, because I was not willing to compromise that situation. But I ended up in general practice, and basically my responsibility as a GP is to deliver medical services to people in a way that's helpful and appropriate. But at my interview for when I was becoming a partner in general practice, I told the partners, I said, look, you need to know this in advance. I won't be involved in the process of abortion. I will care for people who want to go down that route. I will love them, but I won't actually be involved in the process of it. Is that okay with you? What I did say is that I'm very willing to pick up other workload from you that you don't want to do, so that actually I'm not overburdening you. So this was agreed, and I got that partnership, and that's how we worked it out. And I was quite straightforward. My patients knew it, so my Christianity was out there, and I never had one person complain about my Christianity. And if a lady came in and she wanted an abortion, and we would talk about it, and she still wanted it, I would make sure she got to interact with the doctor who would enable her to access the service that she wanted to. But what was interesting, because I would tell them why I wouldn't be doing that bit, because of my moral and ethical beliefs. And I just want to say, basically people respected me for that. And there was one time a lady came along, and a lady I knew quite well, and she, young married lady, I knew them as a couple, and she came along and she told me she was pregnant. I said, well, that's great. She said, no, you don't understand. I want to have an abortion. Well, I was so surprised. I thought, oh. I hadn't seen this coming. I said, oh, right, okay. And so I said, do you mind if I ask a couple of questions? She said, no, that's fine. I said, why do you want to have an abortion? I think it's quite important that you've thought this through. She said, well, we've been thinking about it, and we've just moved into a new house, and we haven't got a new three-piece suite yet. Well, wow. Anyway, I think probably the shock registered upon my face. Oh, okay. So I said, can I just ask you that question again? So, you three-piece suite. So I said, do you want to start a family at some stage? I was, oh yeah, we're really, really keen to start a family. So I said, do you think the baby's going to notice if you've got a three-piece suite? I said, and are you actually valuing a three-piece suite above the possibility of starting a family? 9 months later, I had the joy of seeing that young child alive, because I wanted to be the one. who was willing to ask a question. Another time I was called out, it was very early in partnership in general practice. And again, it's to a lady, and she was actually, I was called out as an emergency because this lady was bleeding, and she'd actually had an abortion a week previously. And it wasn't difficult to sort her out medically, but I could tell by her distress that she was really struggling. So I sat, and it was just after midnight in her home. I was sitting with her, and she was crying. And I said, do you mind just telling me what happened? Can I help you in any way? She said, well, this is the story. So, and she was in her late 30s at that age. Now, this is about 30 years ago now, so it's a while back. Not quite 30 years, but coming up. And she said she'd fallen pregnant. It wasn't her first pregnancy. And everybody, her whole family, all her friends, every medical interaction told her she was too old to have another baby. Every one of them. Not one person. She had a Christian belief. She didn't want to have an abortion. Didn't believe it was right. But she felt that she must be wrong. That somehow she was wrong, so she went ahead and had an abortion. And she was just filled with grief and sadness. So I sat there, and I said, look, I'm so sorry to hear that story. Well, it's not sorry, I'm sorry to hear that. And I said, just want you to know that actually I don't participate in abortions. If they're necessary, I'll make sure they'll happen, but I don't because I actually have a belief, and it's my moral value. And she said, tell me a little bit more about that. So I did. And then she said something to me that has marked me and still marks me to this day. She said, I wish I'd met you 1 week ago. She said, I needed one person. I needed just one person who would agree with me. And I would have never had it. And I thought to myself, I will always be that one. I will always be that one. Jonah didn't want to be that one. Jesus did. I'm so grateful for Jesus. He set me free from all my sin. I was dead in my sin, just like everybody else on planet Earth, and he saved me from it. I believe we have a responsibility to demonstrate the love, compassion, the power, and the goodness of God to this world and be willing to be the one. But if we are the one together, we will be the hundreds and the thousands that can make an impact upon this world and usher in another dimension of the kingdom of heaven. And I believe that's where we should be going. So I'd like to pray for you. Compassion without compromise, okay? You never need to compromise your beliefs. People try and persuade you you don't. But you do have a responsibility to love the world. And I believe the signs of the times is that God is bringing in harvest. He wants to see people saved and added to this church. Why? Because he loves the world. We can't just sit in here just enjoying ourselves with God ever going deeper without touching the world out there. I love what we do, but I want people to come in here and experience God for themselves and themselves get. Yeah, we've got to see people coming to Jesus. We have. Your friends, your family, these relative neighbours all around here, in their hundreds, in their thousands. And then we have to be ready to welcome them in. Say, it's a bit inconvenient, not enough room in kids' work today. I can't find a seat, it's so crowded in here. Great. Father, we pray, would you help us to love the world well? Jesus, I thank you that you were the one, and you are the one who paid the price. Uncompromising in your determination to fulfill your mission on planet Earth. Thank you love me. Thank you love the world. Father, we pray that you would help us not to stand in judgment upon the world, but truly love the world and represent our Father in heaven well. Amen.